I'm Laura Crossley. Thank you for asking me to talk today. As Adrian said, I'm Head of Content at the National Football Museum in Manchester in the UK, and going to talk about all of the different things that we've been doing to engage online audiences with football heritage, most of which has come as a result of lockdown and also our digital strategy. So for those who don't know it, the National Football Museum is based in Manchester in the UK, and we are England's only national museum for football. So the museum explores the impact of football on all of our lives and how it shapes our identities. We have a mission to share stories about football, and we really want to diversify the stories that we tell we've got our collecting policy is very much about trying to get more diverse objects that tell stories about things like the women's football, LGBTQ football, experiences of Black football players, for example. So that's sort of kind of really focusing on at the moment, but we have overall a huge collection of over 40,000 objects that cover the experiences of players, officials and supporters, and tell a wide range of stories about the English game. As I said, our future collecting and what we're kind of focusing on now is more about the social impact of the game and how football reflects society. So actually over lockdown, when we had no football at all, we collected from football clubs who are doing lots of great work in their communities, like one football club even set up a food bank, and kind of players made calls to fans, and we've got kind of different digital images of that happening. So we've collected what's been happening over this time. So NFM Digital is on our strategic plan. We have a big goal to create a virtual museum, and that really encompasses putting the museum online, ensuring that our collections, our exhibitions and our learning and community work is reflected online in order to engage a range of audiences and also people across geographical locations. So for us, this is all about trying to grow and diversify our audience to deepen engagement. Ultimately, if we can convert people to come to the physical museum in Manchester, that's brilliant as well. But it is about trying to engage a wide range of people. We're not specifically a national, but we're a self-styled national. And that means as well, it's really important for us to engage communities in Manchester, but also across the UK and across the world. NFM Digital is about telling, again, those really diverse object-led stories. It's all about stories of football and football experience. And that's through social media. So we have Twitter, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram channels, the NFM website, which is our main website. And we also have a microsite that was made in WordPress about our current temporary exhibition, which is Strip, How Football Got Shirty, which is all about the fashion and design technology of football shirts. We've not got this yet, but we are currently creating another small kind of microsite using WordPress, which is going to be called NFM Stories, and that will share kind of really deep, engaging, rich content about our collections overall and the stories behind them. So our digital ethos, which I think is really important to have before you start doing digital, so it's not just kind of what we're doing, let's just do digital for the sake of it. It's all about reaching and engaging current and new audiences. It's about deepening engagement with our audiences, raising awareness of the museum and also about its collections and the really fascinating stories around its collections. Then we really want to retain those digital audiences. And ultimately, as I said, if we can convert those digital audiences into visitors in the current museum. So they're the things that we're really trying to build on with our digital content work. So basically we had the idea of a virtual museum is what we call it in our strategic plan, but the strategic plan is fairly new. The leadership team here are all fairly new, and so we were just kind of refining that. I'm responsible for the digital strategy, and I'd sort of been doing a little bit of work on that. And then 4 months after I started the job, we went into lockdown. And I would say it can be quite easy for digital to drop down the list of things when you've got to run a physical museum and do exhibitions and get audiences on site and all of those different things. And so actually, when we went into lockdown and we couldn't open the museum, it was about really quickly pivoting to digital and putting that at the absolute top of our priorities and our agenda. So to do that, we firstly utilised what content we had. So for example, you can see on the screen, this is a private Flickr site, it's not public, but we have a lot of our collections digitised, and this is the way that we store those collections. So we had some really high quality images that we could use. We also had things like video content from exhibitions, so interviews with football kit makers, for example, which is our current exhibition. And we kind of listed all of those different assets in a spreadsheet and tried to work with what we had. And then we looked at what the gaps might be. So actually, you know, do we need to create more content about certain things? Do we need to write more blogs? Do we need to do more audio recordings? And we kind of built from there. This was all about engaging visitors with our content. So it is about, you know, how can we reflect our temporary exhibition, our permanent galleries, our communities, events and activities, and our collections online. And I would say over lockdown, we've definitely got there with the temporary exhibition and our community events and activities. And we're getting there slightly with collections online, but there's still so much more we can do. We're really excited about the possibilities. And as I said, our strategy is all about growing audiences, deepening engagement, retaining audiences, and converting them into physical visitors. So the first thing I'd like to just talk about is our temporary exhibition website. As I said, it was built on WordPress. We've paid for about £100–200 worth of hosting, and then one of our in-house team created that website. We have someone who is really great at WordPress. We're really lucky, and we also have a video producer as well. So we are really lucky to have an in-house team with those skills. So that includes blogs about the exhibition. There's a poll which you can see there where we've asked people to vote for the greatest football kit of all time. We have had so much engagement, like 40,000 people have voted on that, and it's been completely skewed because one of the clubs, Crystal Palace, tweeted it out to their fans, and so that's got by far the most votes. We also really wanted to use this time to get co-curated content. So the bottom picture, we did a sort of scheme called My First Kit, and we went out to people and said, could you tell us stories about your first football shirt? And more importantly, that a football shirt is more than just a piece of polyester. Kind of what memories does it invoke for you? What stories can you tell us about that? So we got content from people who were really into collecting football shirts, but also from, you know, just anyone who's kind of got an interest in football to tell their stories through that. And the top picture, we were really lucky. We filmed this the day before we went into lockdown. When we found out we were going to have to go into lockdown in the UK, we very, very quickly filmed a curator's tour of the exhibition. The exhibition had only been up for 4 months before we went into lockdown, so we wanted to give people the opportunity to see it. And at the moment, the team are also producing a podcast about the exhibition as well. So lots of different ways for people to engage digitally with the exhibition. And now we're open again as well. People can also go and see it on site. In terms of our collections, we started a series called Objects of the Week, which is all about revealing the stories behind our objects. We have a very big push about trying to focus on women's football and women's experiences of football at the moment. So the example I've given is one of those from someone who's currently the Man United women's manager. As I said, we're also about to create a WordPress website that will bring our collections to life through blogs and vlogs and learning resources. Because we found that the Strip website worked really well. We've had really, really good engagement with that. And because our main website, I think it's fair to say, is a little bit clunky at times, using the small WordPress sites has enabled us to just do things really quickly and test and experiment, which has been really, really good for us to just see what works and get stuff online and see how it does with audiences. We also have on our main NFM website, we do have a lot of our collection online as well. But we want to be able to tell better stories about that rather than people just kind of clicking on an object and finding out one sentence about it. Ultimately, the story site is about really telling those stories behind the objects. Our communities team, who do schools programming and informal learning, created family activity videos. So they did arts and crafts videos that are on YouTube and also tweeted out. And they did, the top picture is, we work with a local author who writes children's football books. And that was all about trying to get trying to get kids to do creative writing around football stories, and that's actually just been shortlisted for a national award, which is fantastic. I say all it cost was, you know, a camera basically. So it shows that you can really simple ideas can do really well. We also did a series called First 11, which are videos highlighting 11 objects linked to a theme. So the First 11 picture I'm showing here is about Black football pioneers. And they've gone down really well, and we'll be using them as schools resources in the future, and they're also on our YouTube channel. And then we've also, prior to lockdown, we had a weekly reminiscence session with older people who shared memories about football. And at the moment, we can't run those anymore because of social distancing guidelines. So we actually put those online, and we now have weekly Zoom chats with the reminiscence group, which has been really vital support for that group. And they've been saying it's really helped them get through this very difficult period, kept them engaged. And we've actually grown membership of the group, because now you can join in if you live anywhere. You don't have to live in Manchester to be in the group anymore. We also did a social media campaign called Game of Our Lives, which was all about crowdsourcing and sharing stories about people's memories and experiences of football and their personal objects. So we just asked people, we just did a very, very broad call out about tell us like your favourite football memories or a special football memory to you. And people could submit anything, photos, blogs, audio, images of their collection, their personal collections. And we then shared those online, and we're going to, we collected those digitally, and we're going to continue to share those online and in our galleries. And the picture I've got is we collected some oral histories about that. And then we created these little kind of audio vignettes that we could share on our Twitter site. So it's been really good to kind of create that new digital content. And for us, you know, football is a universal topic. It's something that's popular around the world, and we appreciate that everybody has their football stories to share. We want to facilitate that. Our future plans, as I said, we are creating at the moment our NFM Stories website, which will have blogs and vlogs. And because we're able to test, we're creating a podcast about the strip exhibition. We're going to see how that goes, and then we're hoping to create a podcast that tells broader stories about our collection. We're going to be doing more temporary exhibitions online. So our strip website has worked really well and engaged new audiences with our content. And so our plan is that whenever we do a new temporary exhibition, we'll have a dedicated microsite about it. We're going to be doing more live events. So the family activities we've done so far have been pre-recorded, but we've just invested in Crowdcast, which is an online kind of video conferencing software. And we're hoping to do a lot more kind of online events for families and also for adults. And we're also putting our schools program online. So we've had inquiries from schools about running that online. And I think it is a really good opportunity actually, because again, as a self-styled national museum, it's really cool to think that we could actually run sessions for children all around the world if we wanted to. And we're not limited to just people who can get to the museum in Manchester, even though coming to the physical museum is fantastic, and we would never want to stop that. It's a really brilliant experience. It's great to know that we can engage people online as well. In terms of just some top tips, what we've learned in the last few months is firstly that digital does have to be really strategic. You can be really distracted by kind of whizzy technology. And I think it is important to make sure it's all, that you're not distracted by that, and that it's all linked to a strategic plan, that it's relevant to your organisation and your audiences, and that it's planned as well. So what's realistic and appropriate for you, and what's the purpose of doing digital engagement? It's really important to answer those questions, so you don't just you don't head off in lots of different directions. You need to be very focused. And think about who you want to engage and why, and also use your assets. You know, are your collections digitized? Do you have kind of video content, audio content that you can reuse instead of having to create everything from scratch? I also say it really doesn't have to cost too much. We are lucky to have in-house staff with digital skills, but you know, we've just invested literally about £200 in WordPress. Our social media campaigns have been done for free, and you know, think about how you can use everyday technology to do really simple activities. And then also think about what skills you have in-house, and are there any voluntary opportunities for people who might have digital skills outside the organisation. I'd say, this period has definitely led to us all having better digital skills, but we've done that by sharing our skills with our colleagues and friends and making sure that we're all on top of what we're doing. So that's the end of my presentation. I'm looking forward to taking questions later.
Thank you, Laura. That was really great. We can't necessarily all applaud for you, but I will definitely lead the applause. Maybe we'll start with a question from me. When you were working on a lot of these kind of campaigns and activities, obviously the audience you work with are into sport, they're into football. Do you know anything about their sort of motivation for engaging with the museum? Is there something else there beyond their love of football?
I think football is definitely the main reason, but I also think it's because I think our museum is seen as quite as accessible. So we do get people who aren't football fans, and I think that's because we have kind of really accessible and engaging content on site, and that's what we were really keen to replicate online. It's one of our values that we want to be sort of fun and inclusive and accessible. And so actually the kicking off your creativity activity, which was the creative writing activity for kids, someone I know was shortlisted, someone I know in a professional capacity, and he messaged me to say he'd watched it, and actually as a non-football fan he'd got really into it. And I think it's because it's about creating content that's just engaging and accessible, and linked to collections. I also think it's about, I think the story side of it appeals. Even if you're not a football fan, we're all a fan of something. And that kind of sense of community and belonging, I think, is really important because everyone understands what that's like. And also, I think I often, for people who aren't into football, I say see our collection as like one of the best social history collections you'll see. We tell stories about protest, about unionism, gender equality, all sorts of different themes, and that's where we're trying to focus our online content as well. So you can see it through lots of different lenses.
And maybe when you were doing the project about the game of our lives, was that mostly on Twitter, or was that across multiple social media?
It was mainly on Twitter. We used Twitter and Facebook, but I'd say Twitter had the best engagement. We also went to sort of our contacts as well, but yeah, that was a real experiment. We really did not know how that was going to go, and but it was really cool to just try out. We got some really nice engagement with people who shared stories with us and liked the idea of their stories being sort of digitally collected and added to our online content. So yeah, it did kind of help boost engagement. But for us, as I said, with a lot of this stuff, it was an experiment to see how it worked, because we went in with the mindset that we're just going to try things, and if they're not a success, then we'll learn from that and try different things in the future.
Fantastic, thank you very much. Thank you, Laura. And next we're moving to Ireland, to Killian and Kathryn. So let me just share my screen so that I will be directing for them. Okay, so let me introduce Killian and Kathryn to you. A moment. Dr. Kathryn Cassidy is a member of the technical team at the Digital Repository of Ireland, which, as the name suggests, is a digital repository for Irish cultural and heritage data. She leads their Europeana-related activities, including developing their aggregation service, and working with data providers to prepare their collections for Europeana. Killian Downing is an archivist at Dublin City University with experience in collections management, digital preservation, and digital cultural heritage. He's previously worked in the National Archives of Ireland, National Gallery of Ireland, and the National University of Ireland. And those of you in the Europeana network will know Killian. He is a members councillor, chair of the New Professionals Task Force, and co-chair of the Europeana Communicators Community. So their talk today will be on a project they've been running over the summer called Europeana Sport, Ireland Stories. So over to you.
Thanks very much, Adrian. If you just want to fire on to the next slide there, myself and Kathryn will start the show.
Sure. So I'm going to tell you a bit about the project. So it's basically, we decided to do a national online collection campaign because with COVID and everything, there was no possibility of doing face-to-face physical events. And we launched this at the end of May. And initially it was planned to just run kind of over the summer. And this was before we knew that this Europeana Sport project was going to go ahead. So we were just going to run this as a self-contained thing. But now we're kind of hoping we can feed into this Europeana Sport project and continue maybe beyond the summer. And one of the partners that we have in the project is a partner in the Europeana Sport project as well. So we hope we'll continue our engagement with Europeana Sport beyond the end of the summer.
We've a head start, I think, definitely.
Yeah.
So just to tell you a bit of where the project kind of came out of, it's kind of, we started engaging local communities like libraries, archives, galleries and museums, and any cultural organizations who were interested in collecting and sharing their sporting cultural heritage. We started out as a small kind of team, just from emailing kind of back and forth between Dara, who's in Dara Rooney, who's in the DRI as well, and Jill Cousins, maybe at the start of the year. And out of that came this kind of ad hoc team who were kind of meeting together, and listed on this slide is kind of the initial team that kind of came together. And I suppose after the press release, which I think Kathryn will talk about just in a second, came out, we were able to open the collection campaign further to any individuals or organizations who had kind of stories to tell, or sporting heritage to share, and that's where it went from there. Thanks, Adrian.
So how did we go about doing this? We started off, as Killian said, just kind of doing some calls. We had fortnightly Skype calls for a while. And then recently now we've kind of brought that down to maybe once a month. But we have a lot of shared documents where we've kept track of our progress, our tasks, and kind of planned our social media attack and things like that. We launched in May. We had a press release that all the partners sent out to all their press contacts. And we also kind of did a social media campaign then. And then to continue that, as stories started to come in, we've been tweeting those out, or putting those out on social media to try and keep up some sort of momentum and keep people interested in the campaign. Some of the partners have actually conducted interviews with prominent sports people, or with maybe not necessarily prominent, but with sports people that they had contacts with. But we've also just publicized the campaign and encouraged individuals to submit stories directly. And we'd still encourage people to continue to do that. One of the things that might be quite useful for other people interested in doing something similar is just, we produced a guide which collated advice from lots of different sources about how to submit your story, the digitization process, best practice there, licensing guides and things like that. And that took information that Europeana had produced, but also we took guidance from, for example, Epic, one of our project members. They've done a lot of physical collection days in the past, and they had some guidelines for those. And we took all those materials and kind of put them together into one resource. It's a PDF. It's linked from that URL that's there on screen. And if anybody's interested in doing something similar, or if you just want to find out more about how we went about things, or how you can submit things, you can have a look at that PDF. So go ahead.
There, as you can see, we have a selection of the stories that have been contributed, and we've been collecting since May. And I think the latest story that we've received was 2 days ago from the Feathered Horse Country Experience in Tipperary. So really the kind of breadth and depth of the stories that have been contributed kind of range from pole vaulting, Gaelic football, surfing, show jumping, the Special Olympics, hockey, kendo, running, football, horse riding, kung fu and tennis. and that's still growing, and we're still getting in individuals and organizations contributing their stories, and that's kind of being encouraged by volunteers and organizations who are looking out to kind of digitize any kind of sports memorabilia and kind of encourage participation in the campaign. And I think it's fair to say much of our communication during the year, we've been, you know, asking people to try and connect with maybe people cocooning due to the lockdown as a kind of an opportunity to kind of connect with people in their community to share their stories that kind of might need to be, you know, revealed in that. And so we were really kind of focusing on that, and as a result of that, having this kind of wide spectrum of stories as a result.
So if you go on to the next slide there, Adrian, I'm going to tell you about two of my favorite stories. So what I've picked here is two less well-known or less kind of mainstream sports, but they're also two firsts for Ireland. So on the left there, you'll see the first time that kendo was practiced in Ireland. And full disclosure, kendo is my sport. So of course I was going to get a little plug in for that. But I actually also chose this one because it shows one of the ways that we were able to get contributions. And that was by using these personal connections, personal networks. So the project members all went out and kind of said, well, who do I know who does sport? And we went and contacted them. So because I actually knew that there was a teacher in the UK who had come over to Ireland in 1981, I think, for the launch of Mazda 323. And they wanted somebody to come over and do some kendo to kind of promote the new Mazda launch. And I knew he'd come over, so I was able to reach out to him and just ask him questions about the event and, you know, how had that come about. And I got a really funny and entertaining and informative story from him. And he also provided a bunch of great photographs. So that was one way that really worked, was just using those personal networks. And then on the right, we've got Ireland's first surfer, and that's Joe Roddy. And in 1949, he built his own surfboard. And I just love the size of his surfboard in that photograph. It's massive. And so I had no idea that somebody was surfing in Ireland like over 70 years ago, but there you go. These are the things that you kind of uncover with a campaign like this. So this one, again, in terms of how we got that collection, I reached out to the Surfing Ireland and the development officer there, Zoe Lally. She basically took on that role and went out and she found those materials, those photographs, and put together those great stories of the early days in Irish surfing and submitted all those. So that was really great. Another way we managed to get those great stories and that content was by really engaging with the national governing bodies of sport. And I think that those are some good ways to get content coming in. And I know Killian has two objects that he wants to show you as well. So if Adrian will go on to the next slide.
Super, thanks Kathryn. So yes, so this is Fergal and Sunshine Smith, and keeping with the theme of surfing, Fergal contributed a really fascinating kind of audio contribution about moving away from kind of professional surfing. So Fergal is kind of this fearless surfer who would have done kind of big wave competitions all around the world. But within that time, he was kind of always considering, you know, was this for him? And he talks about kind of moving away to a career in farming. So at this point in time, he operates a kind of a community-supported agricultural farm with a kind of a regenerative farming model that's in just near Lahinch in County Clare. And any member of the public can contribute a photograph or a story or an audio file. So there is kind of, you know, functionality there in terms of what you can contribute. So fire away there, Adrian, if you want to play a sample maybe of that audio file.
So yeah, my route to surfing was, yeah, so I grew up in Mayo, near Westport, and growing up on an organic farm, we're fairly busy. But my mum kind of put her foot down and said, we're going to take the weekends off. And we stood at Achill Island on the weekends. And that's when, yeah, my dad gave surfing a try. And then, yeah, I suppose me and my brother quickly followed suit. So that's where I got into surfing. It wasn't, we don't have any surfing in our family previous, or we weren't very close to the beach even, and that was.
Super, Adrian. Yeah, so I mean, it's a really kind of fascinating story about, and he's very modest. He's so kind of humble and kind of unassuming, but it's just an exceptional story about how, that we're not just collecting the kind of the key sporting achievements. It's about, people's experience in a wide range of kind of sporting participation and experience. So the next slide then is contributed from Mary Egan, who's on the left here, and it's a really inspiring story about her surviving cancer with the support of the Porterstown Panthers running group in Dublin, and also Parkrun Ireland. And in her story, Mary talks about being diagnosed with breast cancer and her treatment, and how her recovery was supported by the kind of community running groups in Dublin, and how running kind of in a community like this is so important for kind of well-being and mental health, and having an opportunity to kind of chat with somebody while you're running about anything, and that's so kind of important and valuable. So I think, yeah, ready for the next slide there.
Yeah, so as well as kind of, the mainstream sports, we did, as I've said, we reached out to some minority sports, but we also thought it was important to reach out to minority and maybe marginalized voices and marginalized groups in Irish society, and get that fuller sort of representation of all voices and all sports people and everybody in Irish society, and not just kind of go to, the very traditional, or the things you would expect to see, football, and no offense to Laura and the football museum, but moving on beyond the kind of what would be very typical traditional sports. But we got in touch with a number of organizations then who have some sort of remit to work with marginalized groups. So one of those that we reached out to was Sport Against Racism in Ireland, and they're quite keen to provide some content for us and provide some stories. And we also worked with a great group called Black and Irish, and they're basically a group of volunteers who came together in the wake of, I suppose, Black Lives Matter and what's happened in America in recent months and years. And they have been collecting these kind of oral histories with really just short stories of people, of their experience of being Black Irish people or people of colour in Ireland. And they ran a sports week a while ago. They have a Instagram account and a Facebook account, and they've been posting all these stories of sports people of colour. And we just reached out to them and said, would you like to get involved? And they were very keen. So we're hoping, we don't have any stories in from them yet, but we're hoping we'll be getting stories in from them in the coming months, which would be great. And Killian has some more examples of similar kind of projects that we worked with.
Absolutely, we've had like lots of groups and kind of individuals approaching us. There's also been the Smashing Times Centre for Art and Equality, who have been talking about stories of kind of role models in female role models, and exploring stories within that. And just here, the picture now is of Street Leagues Ireland, which is a volunteer-led organisation that's been running since 2004, and it kind of provides a sense of community through football for people who are experiencing homelessness. And since 2004, it's grown from supporting players to compete at the International Homeless World Cup to being a kind of an FAI, that's the Football Association of Ireland supported Street Leagues, which has, I think, it numbers about 13 leagues now across Ireland. And Sean Kavanagh, pictured the kind of the front right in this image, shared a number of stories contributed by players, kind of highlighting their stories about being involved with the street leagues, competing in the World Cup, and talking about what it means to play football together within a sense of kind of community and respect and kind of renewed purpose. So these kind of marginalized voices were really important to include in this collection campaign. So fire away there, Adrian. And then the second image is taken from a contribution on the Sanctuary Runners based in Cork, which is a community running initiative which enables Irish residents to run alongside and in solidarity with people in need of international protection, who are kind of within the Irish direct provision system. And this is really about kind of allowing friendship and positivity and respect, while bringing kind of awareness to the migration system and direct provision in Ireland. The Sanctuary Runners was established in 2018, and a team of 200 participated in the Cork City Marathon in 2018. And that included 51 people across 5 different direct provision centres in Cork. And this team spanned 40 nationalities. So then fast forward to 2019, the Sanctuary Runners are running out of a number of different locations across Ireland, from Killarney to Sligo, Longford to Waterford. And there's now 1,200 runners across Ireland and growing, participating in about 30 running events. Now that's been affected a bit with the current restrictions, but nonetheless, they're still kind of adapting online and thinking about what they can do. And this story about the Sanctuary Runners was contributed by Leah Benson, in kind of solidarity and raising awareness for World Refugee Day back on the 20th of June. So thank you.
Yeah, so we thought we'd just share a few lessons then, or things that maybe we thought went well, or maybe could have been done better if we were starting over. I think so. You saw a slide of our partner organisations at the beginning, and I think it was really important that we had a couple of sporting organisations in among those partners. So we had the Limerick University Sports Campus, and we also had the Feathered Horse Experience Centre. So those were able to actually kind of, they had built in these huge networks of sporting people. I think that was really important. Killian.
Yeah, and I think within that, like, we were very flexible to what type of individuals or organizations wanted to get involved, and knowing that, like, there's so many competing kind of priorities and responsibilities, and that this being a kind of a grassroots collection campaign, and we're all, you know, volunteers pursuing this, we very much wanted to, you know, be fully upfront with any contributors, you know, that it's, you know, whatever they feel up to doing is completely fine. And that's how, I suppose, our kind of network of collection supporters and kind of partners have grown. And we've learned a lot. I mean, in terms of all the interviews and even meetings that we have every kind of 2 weeks, we kind of listen from each other's kind of experiences and stories and how we're getting on or not getting on. And sometimes it has been kind of difficult to kind of maintain the momentum in terms of the awareness. And we have had kind of varying success in terms of sharing this out to individuals, and then having volunteers and organizations kind of leading a kind of a campaign to kind of get more individuals then involved in a kind of like a trickle down effect.
Yeah, I think that worked quite well, whereas just putting the word out there on social media and just saying, oh, send us your story, that didn't seem to work as well in our case. I know some there's been a lot of campaigns that have done that and have done it quite successfully, but whatever way it worked for us, it maybe we had trouble getting media attention from like traditional media. We did have maybe a few things at the beginning. We had a lot of online media sites that picked up the story, and we had a radio interview at some point, things like that. But we didn't have a sustained interest from the media, and we had a few journalists that got in touch, and maybe we were going to set up an interview, but then these things fell through. So I think we could have maybe done a better job of really pushing the media, getting more coverage in the national media or local, you know, traditional media sources, and maybe in getting the word out to individuals to submit their stories. And
Absolutely, and that's exactly it. Getting the word out that this is kind of free and available to anyone, anywhere in the world, to share their stories, and we hope, I suppose, when we're kind of cooperating with the kind of the wider Europeana campaign, to feed into that kind of feedback on kind of media promotion and how important that coverage is to get kind of more people involved, and to kind of get more stories and get more get a bigger range of kind of stories from kind of different voices and that.
I think that's about it.
Yes, thank you, Killian and Kathryn. Again, huge applause for that presentation, which I think was really interesting, and it's a real testament to the work that you and all the partners in Ireland have done, the range of sports. And yes, I'm Irish as well, and I learned things about sport in Ireland that I had no idea about before. So well done, and thank you very much for your presentation. We have some questions from the audience. The first one, maybe you've kind of a little bit answered already, but maybe there's something else that you want to say. So firstly, thank you for an inspiring talk. This is from Nienke van Schaverbeek, who works at the Sound Division in the Netherlands and also previously worked in Europeana. They'll be organizing collection day type of events, and was wondering if you could share one key lesson you learned in these Corona times that encourage people to share their stories.
I think the reaching out personally, and you know, we just contacted a bunch of organizations and tried to make connections there. We used our existing networks, and I think that worked definitely much better than just putting it up, you know, posting it on our website and saying, hey, share your story. So I feel like we got a lot more buy-in that way. So okay. And
maybe a follow-up to that, was there one part that you think didn't really work so well? I mean, you've mentioned sort of the media side of things a little bit.
Yeah, we could probably have done better on the media side, and I feel like maybe we were, again, because it was kind of an ad hoc grouping of organizations, people had limited time to put into it, and the effort varied from month to month in how much we managed to get done. So I suppose if we'd had maybe a little bit more focused team, or you know, if we'd been able to spend a little bit more time on it, I feel like we could have done better as well. But Killian, do you want to add?
Well, just getting back to the question from Nienke, I think it's finding that connection, and I think as we explained what the collection campaign was about to any individuals and kind of drew them into it, and they could really see the value in it, and the value that will be kind of sustained over time, giving kind of any type of researcher or students or children to explore maybe, I don't know, football maybe in their locality compared to what's going on in another part of Europe or another part of the world. And I think that's kind of really valuable, and by kind of revealing all these stories, you kind of find then that there's so many kind of connections in terms of the whole geographic, you know, spread and diversity within Europe and globally.
We also have a question here for Laura. I hope you're still here. Yes. How does your institution deal with possible animosity between fans of different teams? Any experience of that? Do you have internal guidelines for sort of neutral and balanced communication?
Yeah, so obviously football is a very partisan thing, and that's, you know, that's part of the joy of it, I guess. But we are kind of proudly non-partisan, and that's a really kind of guiding light for us, that we want to tell diverse football stories, and we tell that through people and through club stories, not by kind of focusing on one club. The way we get around, well, to be fair, like if you look on our TripAdvisor, that's the thing that, you know, if someone, particularly from smaller clubs where we might not have as much collection from them, that's one thing that people say, oh, we didn't see a lot from our club. But we try to balance it as much as possible. We choose our objects based on the stories that they tell, not the clubs. We do have a slight bias towards some of the Manchester and North West England clubs, just because of the place where we're located. But we do try to be very, very non-partisan. I actually think digital has helps a lot with that, because we can't show everything in the museum. We have a huge collection and it would just be completely impossible. But what we can do is tell stories about other objects digitally. And that's what I'd like to do with our digital content going forward, that we do kind of look to those smaller clubs as well. So yeah, some people who come are very, very partisan, and that will always be the case with football, but we do try to cater for everybody. And
a question I think aimed more at Killian and Kathryn, which maybe I can also contribute to answering. It's somebody called T Stable is asking, do you play a part in preserving the content? And I guess it's sort of digital preservation rather than physical preservation.
So I can come in on that. So the Digital Repository of Ireland is a preservation repository. So when content comes into the Digital Repository of Ireland, typically we would provide long-term preservation, and we will make sure that content will be available for the long term. And in this case, the submissions are going straight to the Europeana platform, and then Adrian can tell you about what Europeana does for preservation.
Yeah, I mean, the stories remain part of Europeana forever, as long as Europeana exists, I guess, and are preserved digitally in that way. Yes, absolutely. A question for all of you from Corinne in microculture. Did you work with schools? So maybe Killian and Kathryn, I think not so much schoolwork for your project?
And no, I don't think so. And I suppose this gets back to having kind of like a structured approach where in terms of our kind of working documents and methodologies, we did think about this, but again, it goes back to what we're able to do on a kind of proportionate basis because we're kind of volunteers. But I would hope that definitely EPIC, the Immigration Museum, might pick up from there, because they have kind of hosted collection days in the EPIC Museum before, exclusively kind of looking after children's stories and kind of bringing them in and kind of thinking about kind of cultural heritage and what that means. So definitely, I think it's kind of like watch this space.
And Laura, I think you've mentioned quite a few examples of sort of digital work you've done with schools. Is there anything in terms of what maybe is different about doing that online versus in physical?
So we first focused on kind of informal learning, partly because with lockdown, the schools were all in a bit of chaos as well. But we are now going to be putting our schools sessions online, at least 3 primary schools, so 4 to 11-year-olds, and 3 secondary schools, so 11 to 16 or 18-year-olds. We has to invest in equipment to do that, so a good webcam and crowdcast software, and also a mini PC. The way we're doing it is for the primary schools and the secondary schools are more kind of lectures that can be delivered online, fairly straightforward. With the primary schools, we're working with local schools to put together a program that will work for them. But we're actually going to be delivering something live online, but also sending a loan box to schools so they can they can kind of interact with objects as well as watch the screen. So we will be doing that really soon. We're developing that and we'll be rolling that out soon. The other thing we did is our first 11 series was deliberately designed to fit some of the school curriculum. So the PE curriculum, for example, has a lot of stuff about kind of engaging people with sports heritage and engaging people with local football heritage. So we deliberately fashioned some of those to be for a very direct schools audience, meaning we didn't get as much engagement with the wider public around those, but we know that we can use them as resources. So it meant that we had something that we could have live on YouTube, but we're also sending those direct to teachers as well to improve our kind of engagement with them.
I saw, Laura, some of the resources online in terms of learning from home. I think one of them was a video about how to make your own football trophy, which I think is fantastic. I really like that.
Oh, thank you so much. Yeah, we We had our programme all planned out, and we wanted to just try what we could to help people learn from home. So thank you, I really appreciate that. Your project is amazing as well. I was listening intently to it. But yeah, we're out, the kind of next phase is we deliberately went for stuff that was pre-recorded because we wanted to really find our feet with what we were doing. And so that was literally just recorded on like an iPhone, basically, in someone's house with the materials. And then our digital producer put the subtitles on to make it more accessible. We are now moving, hopefully, into also doing live programming as well. So there'll be a bit of a, yeah, there'll be the two strands, which will be really interesting and exciting to try.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to interrupt you. We have just a minute left. So I want to say thank you very much to everyone who's attended. And thank you very much to Dr. Laura Crossley, Dr. Kathryn Cassidy, and Killian Downing for their excellent presentations and lots of ideas and inspiration for activities. If you would like to continue this conversation, we next week have the Europeana Lunch Cafe, which is on the 7th of October. I will now share the link in the chat to that. And again, thank you very much to our presenters and everyone for attending. And I hope you will all keep safe and well, and see you all soon.